or not any of these foods ultimately trigger some conditions like, arthritis, pain, gut issues, whatever that may be. This one is probably more applicable to the majority of the public. This is the Mito Food Plan. It's kind of a cross, it's kind of like a paleo / modified Mediterranean. You'll see what it is in a minute. But it's really designed to support a healthy living, and it's pretty applicable to most people. So let's go over what that really looks like. So once again, I have to do this disclaimer. These are my opinions, not Esplanad's opinions. So don't go to them, go to me. But again, it's all educational. So don't, if you do something and something goes wrong, it's your problem. Come on, too bad. Done, check. Okay, so the Mito Food Plan, it's a low carb, low glycemic food. What I mean by low glycemic load, it's that it's a type of food plan that doesn't bump your blood sugar or insulin very much. That's what low glycemic load really means. And it's also pretty anti-inflammatory, and it emphasizes healthy fats, nuts, seeds, oils, non-starchy vegetables, because starchy vegetables can be higher glycemic, and low amount of lower carby like fruits like berries and kiwi and so forth, as well as a modest amount of protein, mostly from plants, but animals that are also acceptable as well. And limited consumption of grains. I know it's a little bit controversial in some ways, but some people say, well, whole grains, but sometimes grains can be a little inflammatory, and you'd be surprised that if you did a Dexcom, a blood sugar test, and you check quinoa, for example, you might be surprised how people get a huge jump in their blood sugar with quinoa. There's a little bit of false information about, well, quinoa it's a great protein. It's got one of the most well-balanced proteins short of whey or meat, as does pea protein. But it does have a potential in some people to jump up the blood sugar. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, if you have quinoa with a lot of other fats and oils and so forth, protein, it will reduce and blunt the blood sugar effect. This is probably the best way to have quinoa and rice. So the Mito Food Plan in general is designed to improve insulin signaling. What do I mean by that? So if you're pre-diabetic or you don't want to become diabetic, what have you, it helps to improve that signaling so your blood sugar can drop, your insulin can drop. And we now know that if you look at most chronic conditions, even including cancer, for example, the more insulin levels are higher, the more insulin resistant we are, the more inflamed we become, and the more likely we get all the cardiometabolic problems, but we get all the other diseases as well, to include cancer and dementia. So we need to know that insulin signaling is really important for health long term. So it's designed to improve that insulin signaling, to reduce inflammation, and to help with oxidative and antioxidant balance. So what it does, it adds therapeutic foods for energy. We add protective antioxidants, anti-inflammatory nutrients, high quality fats like the essential fats, and low glycemic impact foods, or low carb impact foods. So what's it ultimately excellent to support? So cardiometabolic health, and I mean by that weight management, high blood pressure, heart disease, vascular disease, diabetes, and so forth. That's the cardiometabolic health category. Body composition, so weight again, as we mentioned, especially what we call belly fat or visceral fat. There's going to be a talk later on going specifically on cardiometabolic health, which I'm going to get into a lot of detail on that. But just to understand that this plan is the one I'm going to promote for that particular problem. Brain health. We now know that individuals who tend to go on a plan like this, especially when they push towards keto, have a much more neuroprotective. We found in Alzheimer's dementia, when people go on a keto diet, or even epilepsy, for example, they can get some better outcomes or less progression with that. Pain is also important too. People have chronic pain, can do pretty well with a Mito Food Plan. I tend to have them start on the elimination diet first, and then kind of move on to this one down the road. Cancer management, it's not a cure, but it is a type of food plan that starves cancer cells because it's low carb. And when you have low carb, cancer feeds on carbs and the amino acid glutamine. When those two are kind of eliminated from the diet, it becomes difficult for most organ cancers to be able to grow. So it is a way of helping to support the journey of cancer management. And of course, optimal health, which is what hopefully we're all looking for here today. The food plan, the Mito Food Plan, may support this notion of mitophagy. Phagy means digestion. So what it does is our bodies are constantly doing house cleaning. We talk about at night when we're sleeping, we're kind of like auto-digesting our old particles, our organelles, our membranes, our mitochondria, and repairing and making new ones. And this type of low glycemic food plan, when you drop your insulin levels, supports that process. Really important to do. And all these processes of digestion enhance the overall integrity of our cells, as well as our really, really important energy-producing organelle called the mitochondria. When that becomes dysfunctional, that kind of leads to most chronic diseases. That's important. Some may choose to get more towards a ketogenic state, which means you're lowering your carbs, probably even like less than 50 grams, closer to 20 grams a day, which is really, really hard to do. But if they want that, they can get ketosis, and you can measure ketosis in your urine or even your blood. And when you get to that point, that might be much more effective for looking at neuroprotection, for diabetes prevention, and so forth. There is this notion that if you go too keto too long, your body gets too used to that and doesn't burn sugar anymore. So it gets into, when you start introducing sugar, you become briefly diabetic again. So it's almost like, do it, but then cycle on and off it periodically. Have a cheat day, have it move it around a little bit, just so your body doesn't get metabolic confusion, doesn't get so stuck on one thing. So what are some of the major features of the Mito Keto Flex? I put Mito Keto Flex because it's more on the keto side of it. So we have healthy meats, for example, it would be like grass-fed beef and buffalo. Elk is probably good as well. Protective antioxidants, so a lot of plant-based stuff. For example, avocados, broccoli, spinach, pomegranate, blueberries. You'll hear some controversy on avocados because avocados have lectins, as do certain things. And people can be very, very sensitive to like lectins, which is in a lot of foods. Peanuts and cashews and avocados have a lot of them in there. So people often will want to try to remove that to reduce inflammation. Gundry talks a lot about that, about lectins. By removing those inflammatory foods, not only do you feel better, but sometimes inflammation reduction can help improve weight management. Because the more inflammation we get, the more hormonally dysregulated we get, more insulin resistance we get, and the more weight we get. So but avocados are a good food. Don't get me wrong. The nightshades also have a lot of lectins as well. Anti-inflammatory spices are great, like turmeric, curcumin is great, specifically turmeric, and ginger. High quality dietary fats. So people talk about saturated fat, and a little bit of saturated fat in butter is totally fine. But I think if you really flood yourself with saturated fat, it will disrupt your microbiome and will increase more inflammation. So it's about balance. But the fats that we're talking about are the healthy fats, like you might see in fish or fish oil, flaxseed, which are good omega-3s, hemp seed, olive oil. Olive oil is probably the mainstay as to why the Mediterranean diet probably is so helpful. If you look at people in the blue zone, they are peppering their bowl, everything with olive oil. Right? They're probably taking about a half a liter a week of olive oil. There is no upper end of olive oil. There really isn't, amazingly. And the reason why is not because of the omega-9 oleic acid. It's because of all the polyphenols, all the healthy chemicals that are very antioxidant and protective. And that's really what's important. So when you want to get a really good extra virgin oil that preserves everything, it has a dark glass because you don't want to oxidize it. But really olive oil is probably the thing that you should take a whole bunch off in general. Coconut MCT oil is also fine. Too much coconut oil straight has a lot of longer chain saturated fats that probably can be cardio problematic. A lot of controversy there. But if you take the extract of the medium chain triglyceride, the MCT oil, that's actually thought to be very healthy, very protective for the brain, and a healthy fat. And then of course walnuts and almonds and so forth are great too. The low glycemic foods with a ketogenic option would be like, you want to minimize grains, actually. Not to say no grains, but minimize them. You want to also minimize the starchy vegetables, like there's too much of the squashes and so forth. Zucchinis are very starchy. Not to say you shouldn't have them, just keep them a little bit lower, especially if you have more of a diabetic potential. And of course, dairy. So hard cheeses are a little bit better than straight milk in general, but just keep that to a little more of a minimum. Healthy beverages will be water, green tea, black coffee, vegetable juices. And there's really the no sugar safe sweeteners are stevia, xylitol, and ribose. Those are the ones we think are probably the best. So those are okay to do. And then intermittent fasting is really important. We'll talk about that more later. But time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting can be very effective for just overall metabolic health and cellular rejuvenation and weight management and blood pressure and so forth. So the question is this diet a short-term or long-term diet? The elimination diet is a short-term diet for most people. Although there's some people, like I said last time, who feel so good on it, they go, I am not touching cheese. I am not even going to think about gluten, But in this particular case, this is a lifelong food plan more than a diet. Is there a certain percentage of each macronutrient, which is carbs, fats, and proteins? Is there a certain percentage of each macronutrient that is recommended in this program? Typically, 20% is in the carb category, 60% are fat, of which most of them are healthy fats, and 20% protein, which is a mix of animal and vegetable, with vegetable being more. That's what's recommended, although reducing carbs to maybe closer to 10% may be helpful for some people, especially if they have weight issues or they're more diabetic and so forth, and they want to make those adjustments there. What do I do if I want to lose weight and manage my caloric intake? So you're going to get all this stuff. You're going to have the Mito Keto Flex food plan sheet. I'm going to show that in a minute. And what it does is it gives you all the food categories. Actually, you're going to get this. You're actually going to get the whole Mito Food Plan comprehensive guide. And in that guide, one of the sheets, the attachments, is this. And this kind of, you can see, you have proteins and legumes and all the different categories, right? And if you go to the next one, you have the same thing: vegetables, starchy vegetables, fruits, whatever. And on here, you'll see servings per day. And you might say, well, I don't know how many servings per day. I have no clue. Servings per day. So I think you're going to get this one, right? So now imagine you say, well, I don't know, I'm not telling you, but let's just say I want to lose some weight. I want to be a negative 500 calories a day on the average. I don't want to go too low. I want to be around 1,200 to 1,400 for now. Then you can see on the right in the middle one, you'll see, oh, okay, that's great, 12 to 1,400. That means proteins will be 6. Legumes and grains, guess what? None. But you say you want to do 1. Dairy alternatives, 1. Nuts and seeds, 4 to 5. Fats and oils, 10 to 11, blah, blah, blah. You take all those numbers, and then you put them back right on the servings per day. You just fill them in. And that tells you each serving that you can have. So you can kind of figure out, okay, if I have 5 of these today, I can kind of pick what I want, play around. That will be a way of not having to count calories, but you're basically getting a ballpark of where you want to be and not be so obsessed with, my fitness pals and so forth and so on. And people like it. It's a good way to go, and I think people find it very successful. It's a good long-term solution for a lot of people. Let's see. We got that. Okay, fair enough. Are there any specific adverse reactions I may experience while doing this food plan or diet? Most have none. I'll be unhappy. I'll be miserable. The elimination diet is a little bit more detoxy feel. This one is not so much. Of course, if you're going to eliminate caffeine and sugar, go slow because you will feel crappy for a little bit of time, I would imagine. You can experience constipation. One of the things about the Mito Food Plan I would say I've got to be careful with is that you can lose a lot of the fiber. That's why you got to get it through, but you can get them through nuts and seeds and vegetables, which can be challenging. Because if you're not going to get the grains, whole wheat and quinoa and all that, you may lose that. So make sure you get enough fiber. If you really feel like you're not getting enough of the other, like the nuts and the vegetables and the fruits and so forth, then you can add a sort of a citrusel or psyllium husk to your diet to help get that support. But with this plan, if you follow it, you shouldn't really have any issues because you're getting fiber from all these different sources. Again, you may experience withdrawal-like symptoms from a lowering of gluten, dairy, sugar, caffeine, and of course alcohol in the diet. So this maybe you want to go slowly for a period of time, but most of that should disappear within 2 to 3 weeks for most cases. And again, by scaling back, that will be mitigated a bit as well. So is there any information regarding which foods to remove or add for specific cardiometabolic conditions? So I'm going to be on your big behemoth email, you're going to have something called the condition-specific therapeutic. So let's just say, for example, you have high blood pressure or metabolic syndrome and high cholesterol. You will get this sheet. So imagine high blood pressure. Oh, don't do that. Do that, right? Left, right. So you'll see celery, you'll see soy, you'll see garlic for blood pressure, all those things, right? So it's kind of cool to say, okay, if I have blood pressure, I have pre-diabetes, or I have high cholesterol, which are the ones I want to do? And you'll see they're very common: olive oil, fibers, green tea, garlic, beets, pomegranate. Pomegranate juice is amazing. Pomegranate juice is phenomenal. So all those are really good alternatives for foods that you can do that can actually make a significant difference. And most of these have actually been studied in clinical trials. I mean, pomegranate extract, resveratrol, green tea extract, olive oil, all these great things have been looked at. The Mediterranean diet in general. So I think this is nice because it is fairly data-based. Are there any recipes or weekly food plans that I can follow? In the guide, the answer is yes. And it kind of tells you, for the most part, where you can find them on this, okay? So it's all that's available for you. 1 week of meals and snacks, shopping guide, recipes, all there. Now, are there any added benefits to incorporating fasting? The answer is yes. Long story short, yes. So I like starting with time-restricted feeding. I think we mentioned it last time. So typically, we tend to be a very biologically clock-oriented organism, like all organisms. Every cell in our body has its own clock. Not just our brain, but every cell has its own clock. And it's on about a 24-hour clock, for the most part, about a 24-hour clock. And so if you eat if you have most of your food earlier in the day, you will be supporting a healthy biological clock. If you decide to take the 8-hour window and move it to the right and make it, I'm going to start eating at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and stop eating at 10 o'clock at night, I'm doing time-restricted eating. Yes, you are, but you're doing it in the wrong direction. You're actually doing it when your body is not insulin sensitive, it's more insulin resistant. So all the food is going to be stored as fat. So the idea is earlier the better. The ideal time is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. if you can. But I would say, realistically, much like you hear, if we can do 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 10:30 to 6:30 with the bulk of our food earlier in the day, right? Especially our carbs before 2 p.m. Like if you like the ice cream, take it at lunch. I'm serious. Don't take it at dinner time. Have your fruit at lunch because your body's much more able to deal with that, process that sugar than it is later in the day. They did a study looking at the same food and they gave it at X time in the morning and then X time at night, the exact same food. The sugar spike was dramatically higher at night than it was in the morning for the same exact food. So right away, just by not even changing your diet, if you changed your way you eat, timing, you will find you'll lose weight just from that alone. So that makes it important. People talk about, maybe once a day, once a week, twice a week, doing a low caloric day, doing a light day. I'm just going to cleanse my system. I'm going to have like a smoothie today, maybe a little piece of salmon, some salad, maybe 500, 700 calories today. And typically, if you do that once a week, you'll just feel better. Like your body's just cleansing a little bit. Even your supplements, you can just take them 5 days a week. Don't take them every day. Give a break. Give your body a break, a little bit, relax, and just kind of recover. So you can do that. You can do a water fast 1 day a week if you want to, but I would say just do a low caloric day. And then the last one that's getting a lot of attention is this notion of fasting mimicking diet. Dr. Victor Longo from USC, the Longevity Science Division, he put together this plan that makes your body believe it's fasting. And the way it's doing it is it's giving you foods that are very low carb and low protein. Because those two, protein stimulates insulin, as its carbs. So, and when you get them together, they stimulate even more. So the idea behind it is, well, what if I were to provide a type of food, and maybe some crackers and vegetables and fats and stuff and olives, and maybe I can then keep the insulin low. They're still eating, but they're getting in lower calories, but they're getting something. They're not starving to death, but they're actually getting a situation where they're kind of like fasting, the same hormonally like fasting. And they're finding in people who do fasting mimicking diets for like 3 to 5 days. And it kind of explains it here in more detail. But if they do that, they are starting to see changes in a whole bunch of different conditions: cardiovascular disease, cancer, inflammatory conditions, autoimmune diseases. Because again, when you're reducing insulin, you're changing your metabolism, and insulin at high levels is very inflammatory. It's very inflammatory when it becomes insulin resistant. And so, and if you look at most chronic conditions, which we'll learn later on, are related to some level of low-grade inflammation and too much oxidative stress. Well, high insulin resistance perpetuates all that. So the one way we can unwind that is by doing like a Mito Food Plan, as well as some time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. So in animal studies, you can see benefits of fasting: cardiovascular disease, optimal weight and body composition, insulin signaling and prevention of like diabetes or pre-diabetes, neurodegenerative like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, again, neuroinflammation, and just overall cellular resilience and aging. When you actually fast, you mobilize your stem cells. People think, oh, how many stem cells? I'm like 80. I was just, well, you do. Not great, but they're there. But they're there. And when we exercise and we do intermittent fasting and we do low carb, we actually mobilize those stem cells more so than if we didn't do anything at all. That's important. And then human studies are starting to pick up. Almost animal studies are first. Humans are a little harder. But cardiovascular disease, we're seeing benefit. Definitely in body weight composition, we're seeing a lot of good benefits. Definitely in blood sugar management. Small trials showing benefit in adjunctive cancer therapy, so by adding it to cancer therapy, and of course multiple sclerosis as well. Terry Walls, the Walls protocol, she talks a lot about that all the time. Been to many of her conferences. She talks a lot about that in MS all the time, because she actually has MS herself, and she actually she just was in a wheelchair, felt horrible, blah blah blah. Long story short, did research, got training, started to implement something like this, and all of a sudden she got better. And got significantly better. Now, that's not everyone, but that's her. That's her story. And it made a difference for her that she now perpetuates and is on a national platform for speaking engagement for all this stuff. What if I need some more support to help assure that I can stay on task and increase my chances of success? That's why you all are here. It's for you. So actually, what I would suggest, if you want to do this, get together as a small group. Seriously, get together as a small group. Cook together. Maybe do you take like a cooperative in college co-op. And a couple people will take dinner one day, then the next day. It makes it a little bit easier to have fun doing it, and you all get together that way. Because if you just do it individually, I think my experience is that people tend to sort of fall off. But I think if you do it as a group and you get a lot of accountability, then I think it's more likely to be helpful. So there are a lot of good resources out there. You're going to get a lot of the main resource you're going to get on email is going to be the guide from the Functional Medicine, IFM. If you want to look at this one, that's a resource guide that I put together that has a lot of good information as well. And that's that. Questions?